Lois Andison is a sculptor, installation artist based in Toronto, Ontario. Her art practice ranges from kinetic sculpture, where she uses movement to initiate an experience or exchange with the viewer and the work, through to video and photography, which she uses to document and interpret motion. The latter approach can be seen in her year-long time-lapse video, composed of still images of an urban garden, through her motion studies, which are observations of the still and the moving. Her sculpture works address the mediated body and the performative, and often involved an element of humor. Lately, her conceptual interests in language as a medium and kinetic type as movement have led her to incorporate text in her sculptures. Lois has exhibited nationally and internationally, including shows in cities such as Mexico City, Boston, New York, Montreal, Lethbridge, and Buffalo. She is the recipient of numerous grants and awards, and her work has been widely collected. She is currently represented by the Opencorporates Gallery in Toronto and Gallery Art here in Montreal. We are delighted to hear her speak tonight. As the course has sort of given us a pathway into what professional practice looks like when someone arrives upon it, I'm thrilled to introduce Lois, who's going to talk to us about her professional practice. Give her a nice hand.
Thank you, Colin. That was very, very sweet of you to invite me here. I'm going to pretend you're my students at Waterloo, and I won't be nervous because I'll just think that I'm in a normal classroom. So I teach at the University of Waterloo. I teach sculpture and the electronic imaging programs. I've been there for 6 years now, and my past is kind of varied. You guys know that in your lifetime you'll have to reinvent yourself a few times in terms of your job career, most likely. For me, I feel like I've invented myself, reinvented myself at least 3 times. But the first time happened in my education in that I first trained in design illustration, and I came from a really small town, and there was only one person that I knew at my high school that was going for art, and they went to Sheridan College, so that to me was like, oh, this, I could go to Sheridan College. So I went to Sheridan College and I studied graphic design there. But when I was there, I couldn't find my voice, and so I left and I went to Montreal for a couple of years. I worked in advertising, but was very unhappy, and I decided that because I needed to have a personal voice in my art practice, so the advertising wasn't doing it for me. So I went back to York and I did my undergrad at York, and that really opened up a lot of doors. I was in my late 20s when I went there, so I felt older than the other students. And it was kind of a crazy but amazing time in that I was so excited. I was so excited to be able to make art that was from inside me rather than responding to somebody's brief for what they wanted in a car ad where I would draw these commercials, of 4 people sitting at a table, and then they all get up and they get into this car and they stop and have a cigarette. And it was, I think I did car commercials, cigarette commercials, and all kinds of stuff that I just remember this art director telling me to draw big-breasted women, and my response to him was, I don't draw big-breasted women. So it was very intense, this experience of making a living as a commercial artist. And then I went back to York, and it was fantastic, and I ended up going into sculpture. When I first went into the school, I didn't know contemporary arts. I didn't know anything about contemporary art. I felt like a fraud. I remember standing in the line at the registrar's office and hearing people talk about their work and feeling like, oh my God, I'm just going to fail really miserably at this. But anyways, it all worked out, and then when I trained in high tech and I worked at a high tech company, when I was also moving from print to high tech, and that was a kind of a really great experience working in a high tech environment. That provided the infrastructure for me to teach in the art and art history program in Mississauga, and then from there I went to Waterloo and I've been teaching in the time-based or electronic media, as I say. So even we all are faced with those circumstances of finding what we really want to do. And then when we get there, it's really great to be where you're doing something that you really want to do. So what I'm going to show you, it's interesting that I'm following on the heels of Ron Sherbrooke, because I'm going to show you my last two shows, which isn't really like showing my full body of work, but it's showing my most recent bodies of work. And they just happen to fall into the fact that I show with Opencorporates, which Ron, I guess, according to Colin, has talked to you a lot about Olga, or shared some of his stories about showing with Opencorporates. So I guess what I'm interested in talking about, and I'm going to try to get back into my computer. I had to work in iMovie because my computer wouldn't take Final Cut Pro, so I did all the work in iMovie, and I found when I rendered it out, it did all kinds of funny things. So I'm just going to play it from the program. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is my first exhibition at Opencorporates. So I had been, prior to that, represented by another kind of really renowned dealer in Toronto. His name was Jared Sable, and he ran Sable Castelli Gallery. The problem that I ran into was Jared closed just before my big show. So I had a summer invitational where I had work in the gallery. The gallery decided to take me on. But then I worked like 2 years on my show. He closed in December and my show was to be in April. So it kind of felt like I was going a bit off a cliff because I was going at such speed, and then there was no longer a goal. So I spent about a year trying to figure out what I wanted to do in terms of gallery, like trying to find gallery representation. And I ended up putting together a DVD package in iDVD, which took me about 3 months to learn how to put, an interactive DVD together where you could, have your clips and you could click through buttons and all that sort of thing. And then I made also a booklet that I sent out. So I sent it all across Canada and to the United States, to some New York galleries that I would have really liked to have shown with. I never heard back from any of the New York galleries. I heard from a few across Canada, and then I ended up hearing back from Olga about doing a studio visit. So, so the thing that was terrifying about Opencorporates Gallery that I'm going to talk about right now is her space. So when I told people, I'm showing with Olga, and they would say to me, "Oh my God, what are you going to do in her space?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know. It's a big space." And I started to think about how I got this sudden performance anxiety. Like all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my God, there's a legacy of all the artists that have shown in that space." Every time I talk to people, they talk about this space. It's a gorgeous space. It's huge. It's like a New York gallery, polished concrete floors, beautiful ceilings, an old foundry. So it has this really exquisite ceiling, and Olga herself is a bit of a, she's someone to contend with. She's got such personality and she has such opinions, and I was really terrified for my first show. And I decided that I wanted to do something that was in response to the gallery. So I decided to do something very site-specific. And I hired 3 roller skaters to skate her gallery. And what I was really interested in was this idea of the roller skaters mapping the gallery, responding to the space in a way that was just about the space. And then I was terrified that people would come in and say, "Where's the work? This isn't an artwork. These are roller derby girls," which they were. 2 of them were roller derby girls, and I found them on the internet. I just started researching roller derby or roller skaters, and I found these 2 really great women. I found a 3rd woman who was a figure skater who had never been on roller skates before, but she agreed that it wouldn't be that hard to to do it, as she had a whole history of roller skating. So this was a prep for the shoot, and what we ended up using, I worked with Jason E. Banks, who is a videographer who works at Trinity Square Video in Toronto, and I had told him that I want this really fluid motion. I want both the camera to feel like it's stalking the person, just like in the art world, how you are being like watched, and then but also being able to capture the choreography of the movement. So we went, for the 3 different women, we changed the camera angle from very high to very low. So with Caitlin, who was the 3rd skater, the camera was right on the floor. And when I was thinking of this work, you know, sometimes you need to give yourself permission to make a work because you're so afraid of the work. And I had been to the Gagosian Gallery in New York, and Douglas Gordon had his Play Dead video, which is a video of an elephant in the gallery. And the elephant is a circus elephant, and it goes through these actions of playing dead. And I thought, you know, it was for me it was such a critique of the white cube. And it was funny because I just watched it recently, and I started to feel such empathy for the elephant that I didn't, like when I saw it, I was ecstatic about the piece. And then the last time I saw it on YouTube, I was like, oh my God, that poor elephant is having such a hard time getting up off the floor. And so it just shifted like my whole experience of the piece by watching it on YouTube and seeing it slip, and I don't know, all my empathy for the elephant sort of reversed my enthusiasm for the piece. But at the time, this was something that gave me permission to make my work, because it was referencing the gallery, it was talking with the institution, but it was doing it in such a poetic way. So I went ahead and made, I'm going to show you just some short clips of it. So these are the girls. Caitlin, as I say, was the last skater, and it was like she had been on skates since she was 5. So she was totally uninhibited. Carrie was this girl, she was a figure skater, and so she was, she approached it very much like you would in figure skating. And the 3rd girl, Angela, she was almost afraid of the camera. So it was an interesting thing that happened in terms of their personalities. So when it was mounted in the gallery, it came down from the center of the room, and it was this big kiosk with 3 50-inch screens. think about was maybe my interest in motion is actually an interest in the performative, and I think that the interest in the performative really came through in that work. So prior to that, I've been doing all these motion studies. I think Colin talked about my year-long time lapse. I had photographed from my room upstairs in my house out into the back garden. I photographed every half hour for a year, and then I put it together into a time lapse. When I did it in 2005, the technology wasn't really there, so I had to download the image almost daily. So now I think people can set up time-lapse cameras and they have like say 60 gigabyte cards. But back then, I think my highest card was probably 500 megabytes. So I had daily maintenance on this piece for a year, and my partner wasn't very happy with that. But it was for me a study in motion. And then I started to realize when I did this piece, the interest in the study in motion was also a study in the performative when it came to interactive sculpture. So the next piece I'm going to show you, I think, is Dozen Catastrophes. And this piece came out of my partner is always saying, I suffered 1,000 catastrophes, most of them never happened. And so I wrote out I wrote out my 1,000 catastrophes. Most of them had never happened, but some of them had. So over the course of the summer, in all those tiny little pieces of paper in there, I set my 1,000 catastrophes. And over the course of the summer, I got more and more sad and depressed. And I was going, why am I getting depressed? And I reliving my catastrophes because I had to bring them into my memory in order to write them down. So this piece, I'll just play it for you. It's like the Sylvia Plath bell jar. I found this beautiful bell jar and wanted to make a piece with it, and it just happened to come together. So the crunch of the piece is you can never read my 1,000 catastrophes because anytime you approach it, they just go up in the air. And my dealer, of course, decided that she would unplug the piece so she could read them. But if you don't cheat, you will. And little kids found out if they went to the corner and approached it from the corner, they missed the sensor, and they could also read it. The kids are like that, right? They'll find a way to figure it out. So for me, that was just like all these thoughts swirling inside my head, and thankfully not getting away with it. So this is part of the same show, Meeting Skill. The next piece is it's called the boxer. So the boxer sits inside the box, which is kind of like the white box, and I think it's sort of a self-portrait, which I shouldn't probably say because. supposed to be like a life-size piece. And what I started out with was a very small prototype. And then when I made the prototype, I was like, I don't think the piece has to go any bigger. Like, it's kind of saying everything it needs in just this small, like 9 by 9 or whatever the, I can't remember the dimensions of it. So instead of doing one really large piece, I made, I think there was 7 in the edition of the boxer. So instead of spending all the money on something really huge. I guess that's kind of like, you know, you have to have this insistence inside you to make it through the, you know, the world, and I kind of think that that's like a little bit of where that piece is coming from. This is my other piece. I guess heartbreaking can be a performance issue. What I did was, I started with the word heartbreaking, and I decided that I was really started to get interested in language and art. I started thinking about what if I deconstructed heartbreaking and tried to find all the words within heartbreaking. So I found 90 other words inside heartbreaking. And so how I got through this process was I bought like a Smith Corona typewriter on eBay, and I just started typing out, trying to make like a visual shape, much like how language becomes object or language becomes shape or pictorial. And so it was very interesting, much like the concrete poets, in the shape of the text. So everything started with the H, started on the left, and then it moved into the E, and then it moved across from the E, and then the A, and then the R. And in the end, I had the piece, worked with a letterpress. I'll call him an artist, but that's what he does for a living. He's a letterpress setter. He's totally into the craft. He's bought all these old typesetting machines, and he has lead type. And anyways, he set the type and pulled the edition, which I think was 13 red and 13 black, heartbreaking. And then out of that, I'll show you the sculpture that evolved, because I was interested in how to kinetically make heartbreaking into 90 other words. So heartbreaking is the 91st word. So that's a still of it. So the piece is basically, if the letter isn't being used, it turns to a white face. If it is being used, it turns to the face with the text. And I used a Scrabble font. I didn't know that Olga was such a Scrabble fanatic. She plays it weekly. I asked her if I could play with her, and she asked me if I was good, and when I said no, she told me I couldn't play with her. So I have been practicing my Scrabble. But I did an edition of 3 of them. They're all using one type of motor, and I made a template so that the edition of 3 would be easy to make. I had all the parts machined at once. It was a pretty big endeavor. I got an engineer in Kitchener to do the programming, so basically I gave him all my words, and it's 0 or 1 in the machine code if the letter is turned or if it's blank. So I think of all the pieces that I've made, for some reason this one was really struck something with the audience. The thing that I liked when I broke apart the word heartbreaking was the last word is ting. And I thought that was pretty sweet. Like, I would never have predicted that I would get a word that would actually reference back to heartbreaking. I think that's a body of work from that first show at Olga's. So again, all the pieces for me were referencing something around, you know, these issues around performance or the anxiety. The big piece, which was huge in my studio, I could barely get around it. I had these 3 50-inch flat screens. I I thought, oh my God, it's just going to dwarf the gallery. I got it to the gallery and it looked so small, and I was like shocked. I can never, like, it's very hard to get a handle on scale. When you're in the gallery, you think it's big, but then you think, oh, this work will occupy this space in a really great way. But when I got there, I felt like, wow, it's really, you know, not that big in the space. And so the idea was the viewer would have to walk around the piece in order to be able to complete it. So the viewer was set in motion, the skaters were in motion, you couldn't see it all at once, you had to participate. The skaters were really great. I gave them a lot of direction, but you know, the one, as I say, all the different personalities came out over the course of the activity, and they really kind of embraced it, which was really sweet. So then I got all 3 files, and I was faced with, okay, now what am I going to use for soundtrack, because each one has their own soundtrack. So for the piece that shows in the gallery, I mixed a soundtrack that could be used for all 3. So if you were to see individual files, you know, on their own, they wouldn't have that layered soundscape. So that was kind of an extra component that I had to think about when it's in the gallery. What happens with the 3 different soundtracks? Does it become a cacophony, or do I choreograph it? So that's in the end what I ended up doing. The second one I'm going to show you is the next show at Oga's, and it was called Solving Man Ray's Obstruction. So I have in the next 2 pieces that I'm working on, or not here in the future, I'm not working on them immediately, although I've started one. They both have to do, actually I have done one and I started the other. They have to do with this dialogue with a male artist from the modernist period. And so I'm doing a piece called Nudging Marcel. I did a piece with Picasso's bullhead. And on the bullhead, I put a George O'Keeffe flower. I'll probably show you just still images of those pieces. And this one was the one that I did for Opencorporates. So I was interested because Man Ray, his hanger could go on to infinity. It was the instructions were for 63 hangers, but it could go to infinity. So I was thinking, oh, how could I make this piece so it would actually move? Because there's an impasse in his sculpture, and I want to solve it. So I for the back room of the gallery, I got all these hangers on eBay, and I did his piece, and then I figured out a way, how would I solve the problem of having all those hangers and have them all be, it felt like I was liberating the hangers, and for some reason I felt that was a feminist statement. I don't know why. So I wanted these hangers to be able to flow freely. So the first hanger is 96 inches wide, and then the next ones come down to 48 and 24 and on and on. So the little hangers are really, really small. And that's how I solved Man Ray's obstruction, without his permission. So this is how it was in the gallery. Again, in my space, I was like, oh no, people aren't even going to be able to move in the gallery because this mobile. But then when I put it up, it wasn't actually that big. So that's sort of a shot that establishes what was going on in the gallery. This was my mobile. So I used a motor at the top of the piece, and all the other pieces are just with ball bearings, so they can spin or move on their own. And this piece, this piece was a catastrophe because my van got stolen with this piece, I think 3 weeks before my show was to open, so I had, or 4 weeks. I've been working on it, drilled all the holes for all the bearings, did that with my machinist. When I left his shop, he says, I never want to see this piece again. I was like, you don't have to worry. So I packed it in the van. All I had to do was the sanding. I drove to my really sweet neighborhood in Toronto, parked in front of the house. Horace was up on the 3rd floor playing guitar or something. I thought, I'll leave it in the car overnight. But nobody's gonna see it. It's flat in the back of the van. And in the morning, I got up at 7, and I had come back. It was 11 on a Sunday night. I had come home, and 7 in the morning, I look out the window, and the van isn't there, and I'm like, why would Horace move the van at 7 in the morning? And I raced down to the basement to ask him that question, only to see this confused look on his face. And then the panic that gripped me was like, I can't express. It's probably how people have heart attacks, because that panic is like, just runs through your body. And so I didn't know what to do. I guess the first thing I did was phone the machinist and said, you won't believe this. We have to do the piece again. And it was crazy. So my school gave me time off. They hired someone to take my courses for, I think it was from September to October 8th when my show opened. And the only way I could remake the piece was to think that I never made it. So I pretended I never made it. And then, because if I thought about it, it killed me. So then I just, but the problem then was that my deadlines were all really, really stressed, because I was pretty much on time, and then I was not on time at all. So, so that was, you know, when I did that piece of Dozen Catastrophes. If I could add to it now, that's probably the one that I would add to it. But, and then in this show, I did this piece called The Drawer. And what happens is the drawer, when you are away from the drawer will open. But if you come close to the sculpture, the drawer closes. So you can never see what's inside the drawer, which has the effect of driving people crazy, because they would run across the room just try to get to the drawer before it closed. And I'm like, man, if you really want to know what's in the drawer that bad, then go for it. But I was thinking about this like kind of existential thing, you know, about this desire to know, and this, you know, instrument that closes it and contains it and has this mystery, and what that really triggers in the audience and the viewer, and what that really means about our behavior. So it was kind of a crazy piece to do, but in the end it got off the ground. I worked with a cabinet maker who was great, and yeah. So Olga personally owns this piece, and she told me to tell everyone that I gave it to her, because she feels like if people see pieces in her collection and they want them, they'll find a way to get them. So she just says that I gave it to her. So that was a piece that she had bought off me, which was really, really sweet for me. And this is probably my dry, ironic self that you never see, right? It's called Need, but what I tried to do was break down the life cycle into four commands. And so it's taking it from a female perspective, and it starts with F, so feed me. And then it goes to S for seed me. Then it goes to need, N for need me. And my Mary Walsh expression is lead me. So kind of thinking, working in material that references granite and mortality, and I guess engraving. So I was really curious, like just that idea of, you know, in how we can change text and meaning just by the rotation of 4 simple letters. And it just kind of was, for me, a bit overwhelming. This is my sorrow piece. So sorrow, I sit in my studio and I listen to CBC radio, and I feel like I listen to other people's tragedies all day long, because CBC just keeps repeating the same news over and over again. So I did this piece called Sorrow, and some people found it hard to read the word sorrow in it. So I mirrored the arms so that they face each other, and they're kind of like canes. So this sorrow elevator goes up, and it obscures the word for a short period of time, but then the elevator has to come back down. So again, I think that this one, well, again, it was triggered by this reaction to this, like, oh my God, CBC radio. But also, the word totally mirrors itself, almost. Like the R's and the O's and the S is kind of like the W. And then just thinking of erasing that sorrow, and then it comes back again. So there was, like, you know, a very, very pronounced mechanical. And what I did I actually used mirrored glass for the letters. So the letters are glass instead of aluminum, which they may look like, and I had them mirrored inside. And that was all about keeping the weight down, anything that has to move that high. And this is a much more playful piece. I had a star in the middle, and I thought all the words that begin with come before star and all the words that come after star. And then I put them on this random sequencer, so you get all these various word combinations that are random. And let me see, I don't have glasses on, you probably be able to tell me. Morning Starship. Lone Star Light. So there was, you know, there was references to popular culture in it. There was references to, you know, to the Kingdom of Stars. There was references to movie stardom, art stardom. I think actually it probably started from I have this whole thing about art stardom that I was doing these riffs on, art star, and so I think it probably initially started from those art star pieces. And then from there, I was like, wow, you know, I have the words that come before, but like the words that come after, and so it's really nice, little, playful, more, yeah, more playful. That's Star Trek. I think Olga's favorite was Rogue Starfish, which is kind of sweet. And that's the last piece from that. So this I also editioned. I think I did 9 in edition. Road Star Maker, okay. Yeah, so those were my, this one first show, like I'm slow in my production, but it's really complicated. Everything is about problem solving. So my first show was in 2009, my second show was in 2012. In between that, I was in some group shows and stuff. But for me to put together a show, it takes a long time. I started to work in editions only when I started to show with Olga. And the small work I can make an edition, the larger work, like the drawer is a one-off and the bell jar is a one-off. But the smaller work like Starlight or Need was edition of 2. The National Gallery bought one, which was nice. I never had a piece purchased by by major institutions, so they had bought one of need. And there's, you know, something nice about like that whole assembly process when you're doing everything at once. So instead, some people, when they make additions, they produce them as needed. So if someone was interested in it, expressed an interest, they would fabricate one. I, on the other hand, try to do them all at the same time, which is exhausting because you're making it all the work at one time as the bigger pieces. But then you don't have to come back to it after the show's over, which is kind of a nice thing too. Sometimes it's hard to revisit work that you've made and kind of just, you know, get that kind of enthusiasm through the piece again to be able to come back to it. Do you have any questions around that work? I also have a video piece, but it's kind of a little bit different, and so maybe I'd answer first for those. Yeah.
I have a question about the first video show, the performance. Have you done live performance, like where audience in the gallery and skaters? Because this would be a documentation of
Right.
live performance, right?
Yeah, I think it occurred to me like it as a possibility to do a live performance with the skaters in the gallery. There's an issue then of what sits in the gallery for the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks when the gallery is open. So with a commercial gallery, it's a little bit different than I might with if I was ever asked to be in a gallery where it might be possible of picking up. Yeah. I went to see Marina Gromovic's Artist is Present. It was just so lovely just to sit and observe people, and really enjoyed that. Just like I never got to sit with her, but I liked just watching what took place. So I think that issue of the audience is really good. And then I think in the reception of work, like how the work is received. For me, the fact that the viewer had to walk around it to complete it involved the audience in a way in the piece that if it was just a frontal going through the 3 different skaters. Patrick?
Lois, do you think about what your work is about before you make it? You know, you mentioned something about how the drawer might be read. I mean, and you talked a little bit about some of the impulses, things you think about. But in other cases, it seems like the meaning maybe comes about through the encounter with the work itself. And I wonder, you know, how that works for you, if you always have a sense of what the work might be before it's made.
I do before I begin, but that's only through my sketchbook. I spend so much time in the research and the planning stage, and I go through like a lot of iterations of these kinds of sketchbooks of just like breaking the piece apart and that can inform like the next part of the work. When I started with the heartbreaking print, I didn't know I was going to make a sculpture from it, but I was really interested in, like, I love typography and I love typewriters, like that action. And I was, you know, when I got the typewriter online, I can't type at all. I'm the world's worst typer. But anyways, I was, you know, experimenting, and that was giving me ideas. And I was reading a lot about, you know, the possibilities of text and language, and thinking back to how I really liked concrete poetry, like B.P. Nicol, and how interested I was in the visual aspect of the poem, but then how it can sometimes become didactic at the same time, and then that led through to, you know, the word piece. So again, it's a lot. I was thinking about that in the car today, thinking so much of the work is about problem solving, and how could I make a kinetic sculpture where I could actually go through the 91 words. And that was really exciting, but I didn't know how to make it. But I drew it all out, and I have to make Illustrator files or AutoCAD files so it can be cut on a machine, right? So there's all that preliminary work is sometimes I think good in that I have to come to a point to decide whether I want to take it further, like actually take it into production. You know, like in so many cases with the work, it may not need to go further, right? You know, even doing the maquette for the little boxer, then suddenly discovering, oh, it was supposed to be two big boxers in the gallery, like fighting each other, and then I didn't need the second boxer because the second person was the audience. So the viewer that stood in front of the work was actually that second boxer, and then it said everything it needed to. So all those things I didn't know until I made the prototype, and yeah, the drawing figuring out, and then the technical, sometimes I can get it and sometimes I can't, and I work with, I've worked with one guy since '98, Colin Carney. He's been, trying to figure out the mechanical design on things. It's a very, very slow process for mechanical pieces. A lot of times you build it and then you take it apart and rebuild it because it's too much chatter in it, the movement, I'm not working with sophisticated motors and that, but a lot of times, even with the servos, right, it's really a lot of going back, like on the Sorrow piece, I ordered 3 different motors on eBay, anywhere from $75 to $350 to try to get the motor to be able to pull all that weight up, right? So that's not really answering that part of your question, but it's another part that's like a bit more the problem solving end of it. Yeah. But I think I'm very much interested in poetry, and I think that lately, I used to do that when I was in school, and I think that lately that's kind of come out in the work, in the text work. I was very interested in the poetics in Kinetic sculpture, like thinking of Rebecca Horn, and really seduced by her work when I was in school. I was also really seduced by Joseph Boyce. I like that idea of performance and ritual, and his performance with the coyote in the gallery. Okay, did anyone else want to ask anything? Yeah.
Along the way, when you were sort of discovering what you wanted to make or how to make it, at what point did you arrive at a decision to use skilled trades to help you realize your work?
I think I made my first piece move in '96 or something, or '94, and I didn't know how to do that. So I had this two big basins in a table, and I wanted them one to move one way and one to move another. So I consulted with this guy who knew engineering, and basically it was like having a motor that drives a loop. And so that was probably my first experience of needing to work with someone outside of my skill set. When I did sculpture, I was really into welding. I was such a forging and welding was my thing. But when I started to work in this mechanical way, '98 I think was my first really big piece from the Redhead, that called a piece that opened and closed, and that's when I really had to sit down and get Colin to work through the mechanical design. So I remember when Jana Sturbach came to school to do an artist talk, and I remember I said to her, but how can you get other people to do your work? I was befuddled by it, right? And that was because I was, just so involved in that making in school. And now it's a bit of both, right? For the programming, I have programmed, but the heartbreaking, I didn't do that programming, So I don't, I always list people as, what they've done in terms of the making of the work, but it isn't a collaborative piece. It's my artwork, and these are the people who have contributed and how they've contributed. which goes in the catalogs or any stuff with the work. Okay, I'm going to show you I'm going to show you bits from another trilogy, which is called What's in a Name. So I shot with Jason. I shot these three, with this one woman in 3 different scenarios. So she is the same woman, although she looks very different in each vignette. So I'm showing you a couple of minutes of each one. So What's in a Name is about like this reference to women and flowers and temporality and all these kind of cultural references, like Woody Allen is like, "What's up, Tiger Lily?" and Oasis has a song about morning glory. What's the story, Morning Glory, which is about drugs or an erection, depending on who you read. There's Morning Glory, Tiger Lily, and Rambling Rose. So I kind of scoured all kinds of literary, cultural references. And what happens during the videos is Samantha is on a bicycle, so I grew the flowers. She has these baskets of flowers that she's pedaling down the street, so all the bikes are color-coded to the flowers. And people on my street, who I had to go and knock on their door and ask them if they would please be in my video, they come out of their house and they say these things to Samantha. So they're really like, you know, like, "What's up, Tiger Lily?" And she responds to them. Sometimes she's like, responds to them very nicely, and sometimes she's just really irritated with them. And sometimes it's a sexual innuendo, and sometimes it's really kind of stupid. But anyways, I don't know if you'll get the gist of it. For the first one, Rambling Rose, I hired a local musician to sing Rambling Rose. So his name is Jay. Okay.
Why you ramble? No one knows. Why the wind blows? Outside you roam, but who can cling to? Oh, man.
Rose is Rose is Rose.
Ramble on, ramble on, till you're rambling, days are gone. Who will love you with a love true when you're rambling? Days are through. Rambling road, rambling road.
Where are you rambling to, Rose?
Heaven knows.
That's a nice smile.
You are such a tiger, Lily.
I'm no Lily, and I'm not your tiger.
Hey, Lily! Where's your tiger?
Hey, tiger.
Hi, Daddy. Oh, I'm not Lily. I'm not Lily.
Where are you going this morning, Glory?
Oh, I need a little time to wake up.
What's the story, Morning Glory?
What's the word, hummingbird?
Gloria. Glory, Glory, that's the morning.
It's almost noon.
Glory, you're such a climber.
Actually, I'm a swinger.
There's some weird band going on there, but you get the drift of the three different members. Did you think it was the same person? It looks pretty different, yeah. So that, yeah, well, I think that's it. These are the pieces that I was talking about working on that were, they're just stills from this, oh wow, that's going pretty fast. This reference to Pablo Picasso when he did the bull's head. So I did this sculpture, and in the kind of the sweet spot by the sea, I put a Georgia O'Keeffe flower. So when you come up to it, it goes through these charged emotions. So that's why I'm pretty tired, because I just finished this for the Toronto Art Fair, and that was it in my studio. And the next one is my Nudging Marcel piece. This is kind of like a little animation of, I want to have these bicycle wheels, so Marcel is here and this other wheel comes up and nudges him into action, because he's kind of been putting himself, he kind of put himself to rest. Yeah, so that's the extent of my work, I think.
Thanks, Lois.